the story. If it doesn't make sense, then I guess that must be for the best. Life could get very dull if you knew what came next.
Шановні гості, учасники 8-го національного експертного форуму.
Dear guests, the participants of VIII's National Expert Forum, please proceed into the audience for the forum. We shall start in 3 minutes.
Шановні учасники і гості 8-го національного експертного форуму.
Participants and guests of VIII's National Expert Forum, please proceed into the room. We shall start in 3 minutes.
Аккуратно там, пожалуйста. Аккуратно, там проверяют. Приходи надо чуть раньше.
Шановні учасники і гості.
Dear participants and guests of the forum, please proceed into the room. We shall start in 1 minute.
Сейчас переходом как можно. Я предупредил, сказал. После первого круга вопросов.
Доброго ранку, шановні.
Good morning, dear participants of the VIII's National Expert Forum. Dear guests, representative of the media, representatives of diplomatic missions operating in Ukraine, we're happy to welcome you this morning on our VIII's National Expert Forum. As you can see, the topic of this forum is the one aspiring for equilibrium, which is important for our country tonight. And we shall have 3 discussion panels. So the first of them will be about national security, the second one, industrial development, and the third one, international relations. In the beginning of the forum, let me read out 2 statements to guests and participants of the forum by the President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, and the Prime Minister, Volodymyr Groysman. Dear friends, I welcome you on the occasion of beginning of the VIII's National Expert Forum. Ukraine, as never before, requires renovation and strengthening of its intellectual potential. The National Expert Forum is a communication platform at the top level, which makes it possible to develop useful ideas and proposals, which then can be used by the ministries, agencies, and government state-owned companies. In the agenda of the forum, there are 3 key issues: formula of security of Ukraine, because internal and external security is a prerequisite and guarantee of progress and prosperity. Strategy of industrial development as a basis for economic growth, and also subjectness of Ukraine in the new landscape of Europe and the world, which is subject to change. New decisions, knowledge and experience required by Ukraine cannot be gained with no communications, quality and wide dialogue with global world. Accordingly, Ukraine requires such powerful discussion sites as National Expert Forum in order to discuss the pressing issues of today and also to propose courageous ideas for the future. I sincerely wish Ukrainian and international participants of the forum an interesting discussion, useful outcomes, and constructive proposals to strengthen Ukraine in the business, scientific, and industrial level. I wish you inspiration and success. Signed by President of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. Organizers and participants of the VIII National Expert Forum of Gershanin Institute. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the government and on my own behalf, I would like to congratulate on the occasion of the beginning of the VIII Expert Forum. For the period of its work, the forum turned into an effective and important discussion panel, which unites Ukrainian and international intellectuals, experts, representatives of civil society, politicians, and officials in order to discuss strategies and analyze challenges faced by the country. The next forum, which has a concept name Ukraine aspiring for equilibrium, characterizes the objectives faced by all of us as a necessity to extend the trend of sustainable economic growth with clear understanding and vision of medium-term and long-term prospects. Our country, in spite of numerous difficulties, step by step is carrying out such tasks, which demonstrated by normalization of economic processes and social sphere. In the global world, when fast processes cause new challenges, it is a balance, equilibrium, and stability, which are the top values and conditions of further development of the country. It's nice that agenda of the forum includes such value benchmarks of today and contains fundamental directions, which is security, industrial potential, international relations. Involvement into the forum of numerous international experts, politicians, and intellectuals demonstrates that our country is moving into the right direction and actively joins communicative and other important processes with the international community. We're always open to the dialogue with those who propose fruitful and mutually beneficial cooperation and are prepared to share their experience. I wish all participants of the forum a contentful exchange of opinions, looking for optimal solutions that would correspond to the topical needs of our country and the public. Respectfully, Prime Minister of Ukraine, Volodymyr Groysman. Finally, I would like to thank our counterparts, Friedrich Ebert Foundation to Ukraine and Belarus, National Committee for Industrial Development, that have helped us to organize this VIII National Expert Forum. I'm happy to meet you in this room. I would like to thank you for being with us. We start the first panel. It is focused on the formula of security for Ukraine. I now introduce our guest, the Minister for Home Affairs of Ukraine, Mr. Avakov, First Deputy Chairman of the Security Service, Mr. Kononenko, First Deputy Chairman, Mr. Litvinenko, and Mr. Vinnikov, Head of the NATO Liaison Office to Ukraine. Also, we expect that Mr. Turchinov and Mr. Poltorak, however, there is a war in the country and they had urgent business trip, therefore we had some small changes. The first round is a discussion. Our main topic, I would like to ask Mr. Avakov, how do you see the formula of security for Ukraine today and what it should be in the coming future? Good morning. Please look into the name of our forum, Aspiration for Equilibrium. First, when we speak of equilibrium, economics, or anything else, we shall speak of the balance. When the situation is well balanced, it can develop progressively. When the situation is disbalanced, we can spend too much effort in order to reach equilibrium and have the forces balanced. This is a key component of the formula we find ourselves in. Few words about the balance. A few days ago, I went to an international business trip. I met quite many politicians, who are really working these days. It's worth to speak of the balance. I would like to quote some numbers. Do you have any intelligence officers in the room? Everybody raised hands except for the real one. So there is a sublimation of data from our intelligence office of our ministry, which well characterizes the situation of the balance in the east of the country, where we have armed confrontation with Russian Federation. Why do I say Russian Federation? Because nowadays on temporarily uncontrolled territories of Donetsk and Lugansk, under the mask of militarized formation, so-called Donetsk Republic, Lugansk Republic, there is operational grouping of Russian troops, including 1st and 2nd corps of Russian army. Those are part of the VIII army of the southern districts of the armed forces of Russian Federation, consisting of the local population, mercenaries, as well as professional military. All kinds of types of military on a rotation basis. So the first echelon of forces on that direction, backed by regular troops of Russian Federation. You can imagine the composition of that grouping, which is on the occupied territory. Please focus on the slide. The overall strength of the group of the 1st and 2nd Corps of the 8th Army Russian Federation, 35,500 tanks, 400 IT armored vehicles, 848 artillery systems, 150 missiles, missile launchers, 208, anti-tank missiles, 348, and 319 land air missiles. Operational command based on the headquarters of 8th Army, located in Novoscherkassk, Russian Federation, is managing the group. Also, there is logistical support of the 1st and the 2nd. Could you please imagine that 488 tanks, which were not purchased from the store in Lugansk Oblast, 848 armored vehicles, APCs, armored personnel carriers. This is more than the army of the UK, for example. When we speak of the equilibrium, and we also talked with our colleagues about the Minsk process, and also when we speak that Ukraine must be the first to heed, we must place that argument before each of the politicians, and we must say they should not be hypocritical. We are facing a threat which is next to our borders, which is on our borders. Actually, we keep the mad dog of Putin regime on our border, and we don't let them into Europe. And this is what we shall start with the discussion about the balance and security of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Avakov. I would like to talk to a representative of security service of Ukraine. What is the situation of Donbass? What kind of operational activity is carried out by the security service of the country? Good morning, dear friends. I am not the first deputy, I'm just deputy chairman. You will be. I don't want to break the rules. I fully support Mr. Avakov. He mentioned absolutely appropriate things. The data of our intelligence is absolutely the same as intelligence of our colleagues. So you had a deal between intelligence officers. No, we have worked together for a while, and when we work together, we have much better results rather than if we work separately. And Victor worked in Donetsk Oblast before that for 2.5 years. I was head of the United Headquarters of the Security Service in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. I know what we are talking about. The threats, the situation in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, other instruments.
Containment.
If you talk of the formula of security, it is not sustainable. This is a range of algorithms and means when people and countries exist freely and have no obstacles. It consists of the following things. First, the objects of attempts on hidden threats, the environment. If you compare the years 2014 and 2017, the situation changed completely. And nowadays, in the East, we contain quite a lot of forces, which is going to progress. And we have learned how to contain it. Therefore, the threat has changed in 2017. We have learned how to contain military aggression with consolidation of the society and support of the Western colleagues, because sanctions also give a lot for deterrence. The main threat is undermining of the situation from inside. The main aspiration of Russian special services are aimed inside the country. Nobody believes in a fast war. Everybody, all our opponents believe that the government can be changed from inside by bribing, by hidden agreements, and there is a targeted work in preparation for elections of 2019. The next security issues for the future will depend on consolidation of our society, from how we can organize ourselves from inside of the country and build our means of security in such a way that no external factors might affect our choice in the year 2019. Mr. Litvenko, I have a question to you. From your agency, quite many news were received that on the border with Russia there is a concentration of troops. How topical the situation is, and how do you see it? Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to continue this tradition, saying that I'm not first deputy head. I'm Deputy Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council. Supporting of what was mentioned before, say that in spite of huge achievements of the armed forces, security service in deterrence of Russian aggression, the factor of wide-scale Russian operation is still in place. If Russians cannot achieve a success in the way of destabilization campaign, Deputy Chairman, Deputy Head of the Security Service mentioned before, they can return back to the wide-scale military aggression. And here we must say of the two new deployed armies, the 8th Army and 20th Infantry Army, two new divisions, 153rd, 143, and a division which is being formed on Caucasus. Division is equal to brigade. A quick modernization of the air forces, armies of Southeast District, which receives a lot of new combat planes. Also fast deployment of the group in the occupied Ukrainian Crimea, where Russians have created the access of prohibited area of prohibited access for airplanes and ships, and also traditionally for Russian military machine in order to dominate in the Black Sea region. Russians are working persistently on development of their military capabilities. Western sanctions did quite a lot. They have limited new very serious Russian military programs, like the program to create a new aircraft, the new fighter aircraft of 5th generation, jet fighter, new tank armata, as well as a new armored platform. Yet money for modernization and deployment of the units next to the borders of Ukraine are still enough, are still abundant. And as this is made on a systemic basis, was proven by the drill of West 2017. Mr. Vinnikov, I have a question to you. One of the questions proposed for today's discussion is the place of Ukraine in the system of the world global and regional security. And now I'd like to focus on the global security. What is the place of Ukraine in that context? Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this important forum and for the opportunity to get involved with the discussion about security of Ukraine. Let me continue my presentation in English language.
the place of Ukraine in the wider security system is a crucial one. In fact, NATO allies believe that that a successful, prosperous, and peaceful Ukraine is key.
Transformation and reform. Transformation of the country's institutions and reform, in particular, of the security and defense sector. This is where NATO's added value lies and where we are helping our Ukrainian partners to implement NATO standards and principles according to the goals that Ukraine has set itself, which is to reach NATO standards and interoperability with NATO forces by 2020. We have, I think Ukraine has come a long way since the beginning of Russian aggression. Ukraine has made very significant progress on the tactical level, on the technical level. It's increased its capabilities. And in this, they have been benefiting from allied training and equipping missions. The Ministry of Defense has also done laudable work on practical issues that required quick solutions. In my view, the next step, and this is currently being implemented, is to focus on systemic and comprehensive reform of the security and defense sector as a whole. And that is why it is important to realize that the implementation of Euro-Atlantic standards and principles is not just a technical exercise. It's not just ticking the box, but it's more fundamentally a change of mindsets and a change in the way that institutions act and interact. My last point before I move to the discussion would be that the key common denominator of all Euro-Atlantic reforms is civilian control and democratic oversight over the security and defense sector. Because without this key foundation, any technical improvements and any technical standards will not bring the results that Ukraine wants and deserves.
Дякую. І я хочу сказати, що спеціально для цього форуму ми мали би...
Especially for this forum, we had a conversation with Special Representative of the United States for Ukraine, Mr. Kurt Volker. This conversation with him was recorded 2 days ago, and he is now in Washington, D.C. On the Thanksgiving Day, he found time to communicate with us on purpose for the VIII National Expert Forum. So, a brief video of Mr. Volker on the UI portal. You can read his full interview focused on the security issue and the latest aspects of negotiations for peaceful settlements on Donbass. Before we have the second cycle of questions.
Могут ли Минские соглашения быть имплементированы как реальный механизм для достижения мира, разрешения конфликта? Мое глубокое убеждение, что нет. И тем более в той манере, в какой Российская Федерация пытается интерпретировать эти соглашения. Я думаю, должны быть следующие соглашения, которые, почему Минские? Должны быть какие-нибудь Венские, Парижские, я не знаю, любые другие, в которых очень ясно были бы интерпретированы те основные принципы, которые заложены и обсуждаются всеми политиками сейчас. Первое – это полный вывод всех.
First of all, a complete withdrawal of all Russian units from the territory of Ukraine, control of the border between Ukraine, jointly with peacekeepers that were proposed by President Poroshenko, introduction of justice bodies in the territory currently occupied of Donbass and Crimea, holding elections. As a politician, I can tell you, it makes no difference for me who wins on that election, what will be the political party. It's important that we restore the rule of Ukrainian law, the state flag, the state justice bodies, and we can start to working in the different system of coordinates. Then there will be time for social compromise and public compromise, including, as Mr. Walker was saying, philosophy of limited amnesty. I speak of the need to take the law on collaborants, something like what was approved in France after the Second War by de Gaulle. And we need to take the philosophy of amnesty to be supported by the entire society on a very basic principle. If there is blood and lives of Ukrainian soldiers on someone's hands, I cannot say we can afford ourselves any mechanism of amnesty. If people have cooperated with local administrations, had to do that, or due to some weakness, here there must be the willingness of pacification, and I can say that we have browsed that page. And those are the key mechanisms. So how we can achieve a liberation of Donbass? The peacekeepers, jointly with Ukrainian forces, will stay on the border, internationally recognized border, from the territory of Ukraine. All units of foreign states would leave, take away semi-gangster organizations that they changed the gloves on their by their decision. Then justice bodies are introduced. No popular police, as they have invented for themselves, no any additional prosecutor offices or courts of law. Everything exceptionally within the legal framework of Ukraine and justice framework. Then there will be time of tactics of small steps. And every step will prove to our citizens of Ukraine, living in Donbass, that it's better for them with Ukraine rather than the occupation regime. Quality of life, access to utilities, education, pension, social guarantees, access to Ukrainian biometric passports, allowing them to travel freely to Europe, access to civilian rights, reconstruction of roads, bridges, communication systems, education. All that will give an opportunity that within 5 to 7, maybe 10 years, regretfully, we can pass a certain way of rehabilitation. In addition, that way will also require a lot of financial resources. Might be 20 billion or 30 billion, I don't know. However, we need to clearly understand that, and here we shall need international support, international assistance, and our economics that will be strong and developing by that time. And I hope you will discuss that in the second half of their panel. Yes, we have invited Mr. Klipkin for the third panel. Mr. Nilko, could I ask you a question? in discussion with Mr. Walker, you mentioned that from the beginning, when he joined the negotiation process, he insisted that Russia is a fully fledged a party to the conflict, not the fake republic, the Donetsk Republic, Lugansk Republic, but namely Russia. In March, the next elections is expected in Russia, Russian Federation. You mentioned that in Ukraine, Russia has concentrated its provocative activities not only on Donbass, also is trying to operate inside the country. Do you see any patterns connected or not connected to Russian policy and periodicity? So the patterns are observed for years. The colleagues who are present here, who take care of Russia or who have lived in Russia or would say that democratic institutions in Russia were destroyed, have been ruined. As a result of elections can be discussed today. We can be convinced that the same person who has to win will actually win. As far as elections in Ukraine is concerned, Russia every time is looking for the new voice, a new factors of influence. If they follow new direction, they focus on politicians who had the power and lost it in 2014, and also the politicians who were actually building the new country. However, for a number of reasons, were disappointed or did not receive what they expected. There is involvement of journalists, there is involvement of experts. We can see the work of Russia on all directions of political life these days, and we can see as focusing on well-known people. We can discuss that in more detail, and now this work is underway. I would like to extend the statement of Mr. Avakov, whatever we call negotiations, Minsk negotiations or Vienna negotiations, we all know it's important that it works. So everybody understands there is a conflict against Russia. They are proposed to have negotiations with our citizens that actually do not rule that territory and were actually appointed by the Russian side. There is the only way out continuing influence on Russian Federation, pressure of international community, because this is not just our war. And what Mr. Putin wants to restore the borders of the former USSR is one thing, and also he wants to restore the impact on the former Warsaw Pact countries is a well-known fact. And we can see, by example, of our neighbors, what kind of directions are there, how Putin tries to destabilize the situation in Moldova, Poland, Romania, and other countries.
I would also like to specify briefly if you're expecting any sharpening of the situation within Ukraine through the forces of the Russian Federation here on the borders in the nearest time. Yes, I would like to add something. Recently, the British official resources have claimed that the United Kingdom is at the stage of hybrid war, had 50,000 Russian bots in the shaping of the British mindset in the United Kingdom. This is the Great Britain, where English is the key language, which is drastically different from the Russian language and which is not very clear to the Eastern Ukrainian language. They speak in DNR and LNR. But let's just think about how many different attacks Ukraine suffers every day, and not on the day of elections, not within 2 months before it, but throughout these 3 years. Is it 50,000 or 5 million such attacks? And do we have the direct agents of influence in Ukraine from this regime? Yes, they are active and they have licenses in a lot of TV channels and are liberal laws. And liberality of the SBU of Ukraine enables them to work quietly. And so the interior threats, the SBU tries to stick to the law and order in Ukraine. But so if we talk about the internal stress, or it's a twofolded truth, and we can't say that the Kremlin hand is to blame for everything, both the crumbling of our roads and for the corruption. But the point is that the true factor of the interior threat and attack is the main component of the hybrid war which we are experiencing right now. And because we have ceasefire, it doesn't mean that this is the ceasefire in the political echelons. Let me give you one of the examples that happened a few months ago when we stopped a group of our compatriots at the time when we had heated debates and discussions with Hungary because of the educational law. And these guys were going to the border of Ukraine to blow up a monument on the border between Ukraine and Hungary and began to look into the situation, and so the curators for this group were the same. The group launched an attack on various embassies, and they were the ones behind the destructions of the Jewish cemeteries when they threw a pig's head in Uman on the grave of Rabbi Nachman, and when they made different attacks on the international abbeys. It's a small group, and they have very targeted attacks, and where it's complicated, we may make steps ahead. And I don't think that we are going to go very public right now, but some days from now, we are going to make public some information, and we will let you know that it's really inexpensive, a couple of hundred of equilibrium of the balance. When we talk about balance, we are not afraid of such spikes. When we deal with the internal fight, when we deal with elections, when we deal with not construction debates, then we are vulnerable to any and susceptible to any external attacks. Mr. Litvinenko, I have a question to follow up on what Mr. Avakov has just said. Because your tactic, which you are trying to implement, resistance to the hybrid war, do you have a global understanding of how to act on these attacks? Do you have a complex strategy in place? Thank you very much indeed. I would like to make a few points here more broadly. Look, here we are talking about the Russian hybrid war and hybrid aggression against Ukraine. But Ukraine, in this respect, is just one, although a key front of the Russian Federation. Russia aspires to restore its positions as one of the largest power in the world, and for this, it makes use of all of the elements of its national power and might. First of all, what am I talking about here? The Russians intervene in internal and political affairs, not only in Ukraine, but also the United States of America, the UK, Spain. They're very active in all Central and Eastern Europe, not only informationally. They also make use of cybernetic means. In Ukraine alone, over the last 2 years, we have registered and recorded 2-3 powerful waves of cyber attacks on Ukraine against the critical structure of the state and governmental authorities. And here we need to give due to the SBU of Ukraine and the Special Liaison's Office of Ukraine, which strengthen our cybersecurity. The Russians are very key in undertaking their military drills, and we see that they undertake military operations not only in Ukraine, but also in Syria and in the Middle East, and actively make use not only of ground military forces, but also aviation and their navy. At the same time, they have achieved a significant breakthrough by creating a missile complex with the grenades and missiles that enable them to have the flight range of hundreds of kilometers. The Russians are very limited in their economic capacities, and nevertheless, being a key player in the Middle East, they still try to raise the price to oil and other energy barriers. Therefore, we have a very complex and well thought through strategy by the Russian Federation to undermine the world order. And in this situation, Ukraine resists a very experienced, a highly skilled and clever opponent. Thank you. I have a question to Mr. Vinnikov. In what way can Ukraine and must Ukraine employ the world experience in order to build up its own security formula? How can we gain this formula, and how active should we be as an agent in this process? Should we be independent, or if not, in what way can we expect the support of the Western community?
Enjoys an unprecedented level of support from the international community, many of whose representatives are in the room, and from NATO in particular. And I can speak, of course, more in detail about what NATO is providing. In truth, since the beginning of the Russian aggression, our support to Ukraine has reached unprecedented levels, both politically and practically. On the political side, of course, we fully support and have consistently supported Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Allies do not and will not recognize the illegal annexation of Crimea. And we continue to call on Russia to fulfill its part of the Minsk agreements, and in particular, to withdraw its equipment, to allow Ukraine access to its border, and to disarm all the illegal groups which the Interior Minister talked about. Speaking of the Minsk agreements, I'd like to make a side note, also following what the US Special Representative said. Clearly, the agreements are not being implemented, and this makes it even more difficult to find a political solution to the conflict. At the same time, there is no other game in town at the moment. So the Minsk agreements are the only way forward at present to a lasting and peaceful solution to this conflict. And that's why we do believe that all sides should stick by their agreements. And if a possible peacekeeping mission can help in that sense, then certainly NATO would support that. However, the precondition for such a deployment would have to be full access to the temporarily occupied territories, including, crucially, the state border. On the practical side, if I may, just two words, we have, again, increased sizably our support to Ukraine. We are delivering our practical support through what we call the Comprehensive Assistance Package for Ukraine, which is a package of measures, actually 40 tailored measures in 13 areas that help Ukraine build its defensive capabilities and implement comprehensive reform. And so we work on key areas like cyber, which is obviously a threat, a very serious threat, and we have a cyber trust fund which helps Ukraine build its capabilities to withstand and identify cyber attacks. We also work on hybrid threats. We work on medical rehabilitation for wounded servicemen and women, and we have many other examples of programs where we make a difference to areas of need in Ukraine. So I do believe that the international community in general and NATO in particular is helping Ukraine on this difficult path.
Дякую. Зараз ще маємо останнє коло запитань.
Thank you very much indeed. Now we have the last cycle of questions, and then we will move on into our discussion, including the members of our audience. And right now, I would like to target the issues of internal security, particularly those who are not directly touched or targeted by the Russian Federation's aggression. We're talking about the military department, of militia department, and police departments and forces in Russia. Could you tell, in Ukraine? Could you tell a bit more about this? I still insist that it's impossible to look at the military situation and peaceful situation in Ukraine separately in all of the countries in the world. We may observe this regularity in all of the areas of military conflicts. Of course, criminality was on the rise, and the same happens in Ukraine. Firstly, something that has to be stressed is IDPs. It's the people that had to desert their places of residence in the occupied areas, and they moved in the mainland Ukraine. How many are these IDPs? Officially 1.5 million. We suppose it has to be 2 million people. In actuality, these are the people who are very badly destabilized. And of course, this somehow ricochets on the whole system around them. And this resonates on criminology situation around them and finding residence and places of jobs for them. So this is the first component. The second component, the number of combatants, ex-combatants, right now is about 500,000 to 600,000 individuals. Some of them were seriously affected by the military campaign, some of them not. Each and every individual who has been in military trenches and who has been in the military fire, even for a couple of hours, because it's shocking. It affects very badly their psyche and mentality. Therefore, in the first months after the war, we took the serious decision for them to run rotations for the military units, which would have to stay there not more than a couple of weeks in order to prevent the distortion of the human psyche, because the value of the human life and peaceful life mustn't be replaced in the mentality of these individuals. Here, I would like also to address the world experience. The United States, after they suffered from the war in Vietnam, where we know about 500,000 soldiers and officers who were involved, had a huge, gigantic problem. You have seen it in a lot of American movies. You know about something called post-Vietnam syndrome, starting with the Rambo movies and so on. So this cruel, ruthless statistic attests to the fact that 80% of the participants of the Vietnam War had criminal convictions, and they were sent to prisons. Considering the fact that the United States had millions of dollars to pay for the rehabilitation of these soldiers. In Ukraine, this is also one of the acutest problems. It's just that against the backdrop of other social issues, we pay not that much attention to it publicly. But let me stress that in our country, in our peaceful lifestyle, 3 to 5 grenades explode on a daily basis. If in the past drunkard may have taken a knife out and may have attacked some of his drunkard fellow mates, nowadays a drunk guy may produce a grenade out of his pocket, and he may detonate this grenade if he fights with his wife, with his neighbor, if he has a bad fight with someone that he's been drinking with. This is a hybrid situation. As I said, on the one hand, we have the change, the shifts in psychology, deconfinements in human mentality, and on the other hand, it's the huge load that we have to deal with. At the same time, we are learning to adapt to these complexities. We are restructuring our police forces, and this year alone, we see the drop in the number of murders. Let me talk about one of the high-profile murders. Compared to last year, we have 400 murders fewer than last year. This is a good indicator. This overall speaks in favor of dropping, the temperature dropping in Ukraine, especially with regard to other crimes. But we are just at the outset of this pathway. Let's see how it was in the Balkans. The situation was leveling out in that region only in the third year after the end of the military campaign. Hopefully in our country, this will follow the same regularity, and we will take the same measures, and we will pay a great deal of attention to security inwardly and outwardly. Thank you very much indeed. I wanted to pose the same question to the deputy head of the Security Service of Ukraine about detecting criminality in the Ukrainian territory, the things which are not directly to do with the Russian Federation. If we speak about different crimes which are the competence of my service, I also support Mr. Avakov. They cannot be separated or delineated from the situation happening in the east of Ukraine and the general aggression of the Russian Federation. The majority of the attacks, they are targeted consciously by the special services of the Russian Federation, who are doing everything in their power to destabilize the peace and order in Ukraine. And what Mr. Alexander was talking about anonymous mining of different facilities, which recently we have had as many as 10 to 12 every day. This is a conscious activity undertaken by security and secret services of our adversary, and they take huge resources to provide for that. It's an internal situation, and believe me, the threats for sovereignty and constitutional power in terms of revolutionary situation to undermine the authority in Ukraine are none, and any attempts to derail the peace and order in Ukraine, in order to bring down the power and authority in Ukraine, are driven to nothing. First of all, is probably because of different factors. People are tired. People want to have peaceful and protected life. They want to have prospects for tomorrow. And second negative example, sadly, people don't trust anyone, the authorities or the opposition in a like way. Therefore, we don't have the revolutionary situation on our hands, and we don't have a threat coming from inside the country. And what about detection? We detect any attempts in a systematic way. I'm not going to call out the names of those involved in it. Mr. Litvinenko, do you agree that there is no revolutionary situation in Ukraine, and the Security Council of Ukraine needs just to focus its efforts on what's happening in the east of Ukraine? Thank you. I would like to support Mr. Minister and Mr. Deputy Head that we have to really be very aware of the fact that Ukraine is in a state of war. And the military campaign is such a mighty field of areas which changes and shifts, transforms and mutilates the whole life of the society. Secondly, the victory in this war can be guaranteed in just one way. If we achieve development, balance and equilibrium are of high importance for us, but only in the way that Ukraine continues developing. Right now, Ukraine this year and next year will be spending over 5% of its gross domestic product for military purposes. It's a huge amount, believe me. And we know that our GDP is pretty low, so we cannot expect that this will be enough for the defenses, secure defenses of Ukraine. The viable, feasible security requires development. And I'm sure that the second panel of discussion will feature these issues, the economic panel, you mean, yes. And last but not least, Mr. Vinnikov, we've been talking here about the experience of the United States in post-Vietnam War, and we have remembered the experience of Balkan countries. In your experience, the experience of world best practices in order to overcome the internal problems that Ukraine is suffering right now from, what do we have to use? What shouldn't we focus so much on? Yeah.
In my first intervention, I think the key to Ukraine's long-term security is reform. We are helping with the alleviation of some of the consequences of the aggression, of the conflict. As I said, we are helping with medical rehabilitation. We're also helping with psychological rehabilitation of ATO participants, which is a key issue. You may have seen the success of Ukraine's national team at the Invictus Games in Toronto. This was also made possible through the NATO Ukraine Trust Fund on medical rehabilitation. But again, as I said, we are focusing or trying to focus on systemic efforts. Only through systemic reform efforts that Ukraine will create the basis for longer-term stability, development, and security. And that is why, through our advisory mission, we are helping Ukraine set up that institutional framework in which it can develop and implement best European and Euro-Atlantic standards and practices.
Okay, thank you. Еще один аспект внутреннего.
Another aspect of internal security formula is information security, and in this context, I would like to give the floor right now to the representative of the Commission from the Parliament of Ukraine, Mr. Grigory Shver.
Thank you for this opportunity. Indeed, the security formula information component is of super importance. Definitely, it's not the second priority. Today, the Russian military in the territory of Ukraine, where the information space, also the Russian world dominated. all the time, so-called. It's a regret that there is no representative of the Ministry of Information Policy on this panel. I would like to thank the panelists, as I have mentioned a few words. Our country information security problem is resolved by a number of national agencies, starting from the National Agency for TV and Broadcasting, ending with Security Service, which did a lot in that field, and the National Security and Defense Council. Yet, such a coordination center does not exist, and the government does not spend enough for information security, because prohibiting is necessary. From time to time we prohibit, and it gives some qualitative result. But it does not solve the problem. We need to produce our own messages. We need to produce Ukrainian truths and lies. And regretfully, we have to do it language inter alia, because bright Russian-speaking community is also living in Europe, United States, Israel, and they receive Russian language information from Russian sources. We don't have to tell anything in Ukrainian, because normally people who speak Ukrainian are Ukrainians and they understand what is happening. And regretfully, so far we don't work with as yet high quality. And he speaks Russian, and no Ukrainian. I believe it's our problem. The country has to spend enough money in order to make sure that in every hotel, in every country, every person may find a Ukrainian channel, maybe Russian speaking or Ukrainian speaking, and receive information about Ukraine from a Ukrainian perspective and with Ukrainian messages. There is a very blind, also in Russian language. I would like to add from my colleagues, the Minister for Information Policy. Indeed, they did quite a lot. They don't talk a lot. They maybe understand very little or nothing in public communication. Yeah, there is ministry, but nothing else. It was a joke. Of course, they do understand. Yeah, so they have committed some concentrated things. They have restored broadcasting in the occupied territory of Ukrainian TV with tower on Kharkiv mountain. These to Ukraine. Another thing is content. As my colleague from the parliament said before, that is important. I think it's a big factor of every language, not only Kharkiv district's version of Russian language, also official Russian language. And this is not deliberate and we are balancing between liberal values on one hand and dictatorship of the wartime on the other hand. That balance must be decided by the society. Now I invite our guests to join the discussion. Please raise your hand, introduce yourself. You will have the floor. I'm head of the Civic Council in the Ministry of Defense. I'm a retired Major General. I'm the former military envoy of Ukraine to NATO headquarters. Before asking a question, the key thing I have heard on this forum are the words of the member of the National Security and Defense Council of our country, and the Minister of Home Affairs. The Minsk agreements nowadays are dead. They do not work. It means we all need to develop a scheme that we can stop this war, that nobody really needs. And really the agreements work that have to work. That's the first thing. Also, from the Ministry of Home Affairs, I hear there is Ministry of Information Policy, and it doesn't work for some reason. That lack of due to the lack of professionalism, or maybe nepotism, they must be excluded or something. And now The question to Mr. Vinnikov, Ukraine during its independence was honest, predictable, open counterparty. We have surrendered the third nuclear potential and received what? A piece of paper, which doesn't work. Ukraine seconded to Iraq the fourth contingent, size-wise. The guys have died in action, some of them were injured. So we were honest. Ukraine, as a partner of NATO, participates in every operation under the auspices of NATO. I will not list them. Ukraine was the first one to join NATO response forces, the program of exchange of data about aerial situation. Ukrainian is now under aggression. Therefore, I have a question from the civil society I'm now part of. Whether the international organizations, whether the international players, signatories of Budapest Memorandum, NATO member countries, are they doing really enough in order to stop the war? We have don't have to speak only. We need to demand from the international community to stop that war, not just to explain, because we were honest, and our counterparties should also be honest.
Thank you. Ukraine has indeed been a steadfast partner for NATO. It has participated in most NATO missions and operations: Kosovo, Afghanistan, Mediterranean, NATO response force. You're right. At the same time, Ukraine has gone through many changes of foreign policy orientation. Nevertheless, throughout that 20-year period that we celebrated this year, the 20th anniversary of our distinctive partnership, the cooperation has been proceeding regardless. Now, as I said, since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, NATO and the wider international community have increased their support to Ukraine tremendously. At the same time, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and therefore Article 5, as you know, doesn't apply. The overall level of support is not just what NATO provides as an organization. We provide advisory support, we provide some technical support through trust funds. But I think that the support provided bilaterally by key NATO allies is making a significant difference. I read the other day that the overall value of that support to the security and defense sector in Ukraine exceeds $750 million US dollars. That we see allied countries training Ukrainian troops on a daily basis, including in Yavoriv. We see them providing equipment to Ukraine, of course, not necessarily the type of equipment that Ukraine would like, but as far as I understand, that is an issue that is being also considered by several allies bilaterally. So I think, in addition to the support, of course, the strong political support, which I already highlighted, which is not to be underestimated, frankly, the unity that the international community has shown and is showing in condemnation of Russia's aggressive actions, the sanctions regimes that are in place still against Russia, and I think the effect of which are being felt in Moscow. All of this wasn't necessarily expected at the beginning. So I think that we shouldn't underestimate the level of support that Ukraine is receiving.
Okay, thank you. Зинка, вы хотели добавить?
Я хочу поддержать сентенцию товарища генерала.
I would like to support the statement of Mr. General. Is the vocabulary of our NATO partners, there must be the language of Budapest Memorandum, which guaranteed Ukraine territorial integrity and independence in exchange of nuclear potential. However, the Western world betrayed Ukraine. This is true. I would like to thank for NATO support programs as well as sanctions. However, yet Ukraine was betrayed in the most rude form, most vulgar form. And we can raise this question in the acute way. And we should not be shy about it. This is our country, and we were cheated. And there must be real policy of Ukraine. And we should not be shy saying, sorry, we were slightly cheated. No, the Budapest Memorandum clearly defines. Saying that Budapest Memorandum was not a formal legal document. What kind of Minsk agreements what kind of document Minsk agreements are? Whom they were signed by? Mr. Litvinenko has a short statement, and then we shall have more questions from the audience. I'd like to say a few words to what Mr. General said before. He said the war is not needed to anyone. Regretfully, the war is needed to the ones who started it, to those who supplied hundreds of tons of munitions, as well as fuels and lubricants, those who have supplied 480 tanks, 800 APCs, armored personnel carriers. The war can be stopped when take such a decision. There's a question from the audience. Good morning, my name is Yaroslav Krit from Zaporizhia. Mr. Avakov, you mentioned, you said a few words of internal security, saying that there is a decline of murders. Everybody knows that the law enforcement bodies lack instruments for investigation of particular crimes, and nowadays in Ukraine, a good trend is they start to introduce safe cities. But every city is introducing that project in its own way, the way they see it. The question is, on the legislative level, can you regulate that issue of safe cities in terms of equipment, or in terms of software, in terms of quality of surveillance cameras, imaging cameras, and will those safe cities, which are now being built locally, in some way interconnected into one system? We shall gather more questions. I also have a question to Mr. Minister. So, Mr. Avakov, when you were signed of the settlement in the East, you mentioned elections, that they need to be held as soon as possible. I believe this is one of the main plans of Kremlin, to do elections as soon as possible and legitimize the people in that territory through elections. And there is a plan of influencing the remaining situation. Maybe we should speak of the moratorium of elections on that territory, let's say for 10 years after settlement. Another question, which will be followed by answers. Irina Vereshchuk, International Center of Baltic Black Sea Studies. The question is the following. Within this topic, when we are looking for restoring equilibrium, when we are saying that it's difficult for us to join NATO for Ukraine in the current situation, when you also see the presentation of the minister about the number of military units nowadays and equipment concentrated in the east of Ukraine. The question is as follows. Does Ukraine develop a plan about signing military alliances inside Europe? We are speaking of United Army of Europe, or by the example of Azerbaijan and Turkey in the year 2010. Is there any plan of this kind? And if yes, please share with us. Maybe this is a question to representative of the Security and Defense Council. A safe city system that you mentioned, we have 4 models we are testing in the territory of the country. I mean, system of security, full monitoring of the city on the basis of intellectual surveillance cameras, systems of criminal analysis. We have 2 projects with international partners, and we choose which platform will be a basic one. Those are large, quite a lot of money for implementation throughout the country, but this is effective. For the first time, the system was introduced in the full cycle, preliminarily in Mariupol, based on intellectual surveillance cams, the same as they have in Singapore or London. That system, even availability of that system and the PR around it reduced crime in Mariupol over 1 year by 30%, because any perpetrator understands that information about him becomes known immediately. The question is how to connect the system to criminal analysis and competent officers, how to connect the system of Mariupol to the adjacent territories, how to make it the system of Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, Kiev, in the unified database. We are working on that. And this is also related to changes of architecture of databases in general, in the ministry and in the country. And this is the most serious piece of work we are actively working on, including that with our advisory mission in the European Union. As a colleague has mentioned, in Kiev we shall present such a system in the full scale. Next year we have discussed it with Mayor Klitschko. And after that, we shall choose, most probably choose a single system that will have several subsystems that will be implemented. Now, as far as elections is concerned, I insisted on what I said before, please don't confuse. My deep conviction is the same as in Spain, same as in the Balkans. Elections to Ukrainian parliament in the occupied territories after liberation should not take place within 5 to 7 years. This is international practice. People need to chill down from changes. As far as local government is concerned, I think that the elections should take place because the marionette fake administrations must be replaced with new executive branch agencies. And I insist that regardless of political affiliation, what is the attitude of those people? To some extent, they will be pro-Russian anyway, but their function will not be political. This will be to provide for the quality of life. This is my pattern when I speak of local elections. Of course, for the transitional period, there must be some. We have military civilian administrations in the east of Ukraine, some kind of administrations to be coordinated with vertical of state government. This is a complex mechanism, and yet it should be based on the local elections because this will be the way of trust, and this is a mechanism to remove the self-proclaimed guys from the local government. The elections on Donbass will be possible after restoration of all Ukrainian institutions. When all institutions are restored, I start working, we can speak of elections. The elections now, while those territories are uncontrolled, they were reviewed by Russia quite many times, and they were refused because they won't be recognized by anyone, the same as no governments are recognized. We saw the weaponry, shall we do that on the barrels of Russian tanks? Is it for free campaigning, whether the politicians and journalists can enter those territories? First, they should remove their military, and then we have some question about the international component. Otherwise, you words about elections. Ukrainian law is clearly formulated that elections on Donbass are only possible after creating conditions for observance of all standards of OSCE. First of all, this is about removal of all mercenaries, all troops, restoring the law and order, access of Ukrainian media, Ukrainian civic organizations, Ukrainian political parties. It's a huge list in Ukrainian legislation. Before this is implemented, no elections can take place. And this is what was discussed. As far as international capability is concerned, the largest strategy of national security of Ukraine was of the year 2015. The leading direction of Ukrainian policy is development of partnership with the leading European countries. As our neighbors like Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Romania, the most influential countries of European Union, such as Germany, France, United Kingdom, and Ukraine, is persistently working on that. The next point I would like to insist on declaration of independence of Ukraine back in 1991 was a clear Western choice, pro-Western choice. Just declaration of independence from Russia, let us say frankly, the former Soviet Union to a large extent was actually Russia. This was our choice in favor of Europe, and it was a choice in favor of European or Euro-Atlantic organizations. And the third moment, which is very important, we shall become NATO members in case we become useful for NATO. When we are up to criteria and when we reach the relevant level of compatibility. This is what we are working at. persistently. And finally, I'm deeply convinced that though our independence, our security is our own business, yet helping others, NATO is helping itself. That's a short statement.
Mr. Arsenov, first, I'd like to make one point that in our discourse, you can still feel the transformation of notions. We talk about occupied territories, and we mean the Donbas as one of the technologies which is Russia imposing on us. These territories is not only the Donbas, it's also Crimea. It's the philosophy which sooner or later will be offered to us by the Russian Federation. They will say, okay, you can get back here the Donbas, but the annexation of Crimea is never going to be stopped. But it's unacceptable. We need Crimea just as much as we need the Donbas. Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation, my delivery. Mr. Interior Minister, when he was saying about Crimea being a temporarily occupied territory, we have to keep it in mind, and this is something I'd like to start my comment with, regarding the fact that part of the security, apart from the fact that have been previously discussed by our Euro-Atlantic Partnership representatives and the representation of these forces in Ukrainian information security. Another important component is a legal component, the laws that we pass into effect and that have to ensure the security and the force of Ukraine in defending our positions in international courts. Now in the Parliament, for the second reading, is presented a most important draft bill, which is to do with temporarily occupied territories, and there's a lot of discussion going on, and I regret that now the official side, the president's side, still resists the fact that this bill has to be universal for both Crimea and eastern occupied territories in order to ensure and restore territorial integrity of Ukraine. Therefore, this first point of discussion has to be continued, and I believe it has to relate to the whole complex of measures. Second point, it's critical that in this draft bill law, we will not mention a single time Minsk agreement, that the Russian Federation will be stated as an aggressor, but I also hope that this draft law will also envisage the creation of the interagency coordination unit that will have one unified consolidated position of Ukraine with regard to the Russian Federation. The war will come to its end, and at one point we will have to win also in all of the international courts and make sure that Russia pays all of the well-deserved reparations for the losses that the Ukrainian side has incurred. Because quite often we have to take a cool hand in preparation of the second reading of this draft bill. So if we have any comments, I will be very willing to take all of the observations. Now I would like to give the floor to Vadim Minchenko. I would like to address all of the distinguished panelists, because here we can see people who are decision makers, or the ones that influence decisions taken. Unfortunately, sometimes I was listening to the discussion underway that we're not discussing the formula of security, but the formula of danger, because the threats are heard of all the time. You don't have to be a prophet to say that Ukraine in the nearest future, both in the nearest future and at all times, has and will remain the focus of aggression and danger. Lots of different countries suffer from various challenges. But now the position of Ukraine is such that Ukraine will always suffer from external danger. That's our way. We need to look for the formula of the security to ensure this matters. Perhaps this is in place, but I would really suggest that all of you, and I'm really making this point, perhaps suggest our involvement. Let us believe that today's panel is not going to finish. It's just the beginning, because we will still have to work a lot in the restoration of our sovereignty at all times, because Ukraine has always been in this situation. So it's important to find a model, because we know NATO, other models, Israeli model, for instance, I don't know which other ones you can take as an example. Ukraine has to find its own way, and the Gershenyan Institute, whose representative I am, offers all of its grounds, all of the platforms. Probably we will have to interact with the Security Council of Ukraine. I would like you to react, our panelists react to all of the statements, and then I will give the floor to Mr. Lishchina to discuss more what one of the parliamentarians had to say. Thank you for your comments, but trust us. If we were to tell you about everything that all of our agencies do, the format of this discussion would not be enough. I could talk to you about the intelligence mode that we have initiated. This is the response, but the formula and the strategy, they may be at different levels, and this is being deliberated by all of us. We have general relations and negotiations with the representatives of the Western community, with the representative of Western organizations. Last week, I met the representatives of the Polish intelligence forces, and we said that Poland, that has always been a representative and the speaker, a loud mouth for Ukraine, now we are losing our stance, and a lot has to be renewed. And probably there will be no general formula, because the threats are general. How long-lasting will this process be? The process of negotiations and looking for the formula will be ongoing and continuous. Developing general positions is being done today. Then SBU response, I would like to thank for this proposition that you have just delivered. Secondly, I would like to say about one condition, precondition of a successful formula, its development. Our country needs development, both economic, social, and institutional, the strengthening of its military forces, the strengthening of the police and military ministries of Ukraine, intelligence and counterintelligence forces. We have departed from onslaught operations, but other challenges are awaiting us. We are the heads of various agencies in front of you, and we know how complicated the conditions are. In order to fend off, in order to fight all of these challenges, and in order to ensure the continuous existence and sustainability of our nation, we have to interact with the civil society, with the analytical think tanks, etc. Thank you. We also had the comment made by one of the representatives of the audience here, Mr. Karelko. Thank you for the opportunity to make this delivery. I'll be very brief. With regard to the preparation of the stance of Ukraine at international judicial level, it seems to me that this international hybrid war has resulted in the occurrence and the appearance of new fronts of military warfare, which previously were unknown, or at least not on the scale as they're raging in Ukraine, at least. And today, when Ukraine has approached the International UN High Court with the claims on 2 conventions and with 5 claims to International Human Rights Court, and this is where I work directly, there is also separate interaction with the International Criminal Court. That is to say that we have several international fronts where the Russian Federation is reluctant to cooperate with us, because there it is a defendant. And concerning the issues of defending or protecting Ukrainians' interests in these high courts, the work is ongoing, it's continual. As I was sitting here, I was getting new information, and it turns out that I'm automatic in my thinking. How can I approach the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine in order to receive the responses? In what form will the SBU and the Ministry of Defense provide us with the necessary information? How am I to respond to the representatives of NATO when they talk about the Russian Federation's aggression, and all of these confirmations require our position, etc. When we talk about national legislation, there's an interesting point here. On the one hand, how much will it help us to stand up for the positions against the Russian aggression is still an issue because international courts consider the issue of aggression and claiming the partial territorial control more as a fact rather than a legal precedent that can be entrenched in the national legislation. It will not have the decisive nature, but sooner or later we understand these territories will be resumed to the Ukrainian authorities and these citizens will have to be restored in the same citizenship rights as before. So when we join these territories again, these people may be limited in their national rights, so they may approach international high courts. So these limitations that we are right now providing for instance, limitations in elections to the Parliament of Ukraine, it's something that may be introduced, but still, respective laws and measures have to be undertaken in terms of explaining why and how we will be imposing these limitations and lifting them. Mr. Vinnikov also wanted to make a short comment, and then I also see 3 raised hands, and that will be it because time is short.
Questions that were raised both from the audience and on the panel about what the best formula for security is for Ukraine. As we all know, the Verkhovna Rada recently adopted a law that makes the pursuit of NATO membership, or actually NATO membership, a strategic foreign policy goal of Ukraine. And we of course took note of that decision. At the same time, the focus right now is on reforms in order to meet the standards that are required. And here, NATO is providing support to Ukrainian efforts. I think what I already said, the comprehensive systemic reform of the entire security and defense sector, that includes the Ministry of Interior and its subordinate agencies, that includes the Security Service of Ukraine, and of course it includes the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces. Here, the key is to establish an institutional framework that works seamlessly, where all the agencies can work as one whole, as one complex. And finally, I would say that a successful Ukraine is the best response to Russia's aggression. And this also goes for the eventual reintegration of the occupied territories.
Thank you. Пожалуйста, 3 последних вопроса. Вот первый.
3 last questions, please. Introduce yourself, Maria Antonova, American-Ukrainian Business Council. I would like to thank all of the panelists and all of the participants for the fascinating questions, but let me say one thing. We talk about balance and looking for the security formula and information security. Good news that next year the army will be better provided for financially, but still there is one issue, one critically underfinanced area is the army of our diplomats. The shortage of money to finance for the representations of Ukraine abroad, when we only have one ambassador who represents 3 countries, when one ambassador in critically important countries such as Belgium has to perform the functions as a representative at NATO, as a representative at the European Union, is completely wrong. There is no opportunity to deliver, get across most important messages from Ukraine to the places where they're most wanted. What Mr. Minister said today, that more than 400 different tanks, etc., have been provided, you see, for many international partners, this is complete news, because right now Ukraine has simply no capacities to perform its functions properly. And I understood that the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Groysman, has already made the statement that the financing of diplomatic missions will be increased. But I still would like to appeal with all of the representatives here, if you can exert any kind of influence in this respect. You see, sadly and unfortunately, at the diplomatical level, where highly professional diplomats are supposed to work, there is a drastic shortage of them. That's why we are losing our information warfare. Thank you. Reanimation reforms package, and my question goes to Deputy Security Council of Ukraine. What you personally find as an obstacle to call a spade, that is to call a war a war. And another last question, please. Edward Simpson, National Commission on Industrial Development. I have two questions to Mr. Avakov. Here we have said that one of the most important elements of economic security development is economic development, but on the contrary, in order to ensure economic development, we need to provide for security in order to invite and attract investment. So, Mr. Avakov, do you have anything to say to the international investors? You're one of the key people to provide for the security in Ukraine in order to respond to the standard and routine text about overall corruption and horrible risks. And
for sure, NATO organization making together with experts some analysis of different scenarios. On your opinion, what is the most risky and still most dangerous scenario from global peace point of view deals with Ukraine? What may happen? Something terrible, on your opinion, or not?
Thank you for your question, please. Mr. Avakov.
Если у нас слова
do we have any words to say to the international investors to put them to peace, right? For business, we have not just words but actions. This is the latest voted in law in the parliament, the so-called masks show stop. It was initiated by the Prime Minister of Ukraine, the Interior Ministry. This is an unprecedented law. When it is published, please read it carefully and you will understand that we have made such a step ahead that some of my investigators may even attack me because we have really raised such a benchmark. We have taken the benchmark of the highest liberal attitude to businesses that we are honestly not prepared for. And on the one hand, of course, we want to ensure that they are lucky, but on the other hand, we need to ensure this lawlessness of searches, inspections, and dogging.
понять ответственность.
Small-sized and large-sized business. On the other hand, we want to make sure that businesses want to collaborate with us. This is the key law, and there is a whole range of other legislative norms which are being prepared, and I think these are fundamental things which will ensure the step-by-step forward way ahead. And criminality in the streets also matters. It's another component that falls in the same ballpark figure. No one's going to engage in a business activity in the country where everything is rickety and where are self-proclaimed gangs which reclaim territory. So I want to make a statement. The monopoly to exerting force in the country must belong only to its state and government.
I think that with Russia's aggression, Moscow has torn up the rule-based order that was established, particularly since the Cold War. And in fact, it's the first time since the Second World War that a European power has taken territory of another European state by force. So this has fundamentally changed the security architecture perspective in Europe. Having said that, there is clearly no military solution to the aggression from Ukraine's perspective. So any solution will have to be political, and that is why we do support the Minsk agreements for want of anything better. Any political solution is supported by the allies. I wouldn't want to go into hypothetical scenarios, but clearly Ukrainian armed forces have made significant progress, as I said, from a very weak fighting force at the beginning of the aggression. They are now able to withstand the aggression at its current level, and nobody would want to see that level escalate, of course.
Okay,
that is why it is so important that all sides implement their Minsk agreement commitments. And of course, it's not an easy process, but it's the one that we feel needs to be continued.
Okay, we have enough time. Thank you. Шановні пані та панове,
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for your participation in this discussion. I thank all of our panelists. We're going to have a break of 15 minutes, which is to be followed by the next panel, the strategy of industrial development as the foundation of the security build-up in the country.
Of course, our modern force is the level of the hero and not the representative and representative of the civil society. We speak about this. I speak in the media. Yesterday I was in the Stockholm but these decisions are taken on a case by case basis by colleagues. About formats and about the agenda. The agendas are always very full. Because the defense ministry, chief of general staff, everybody wants to peace sites. Okay, yeah. I multilateral organization.
Several TV channels are waiting for you. Maybe just 10 minutes again after Mr. Rocker.
Well, you know nothing about nature also. Yes,
Раз, раз, два, три, раз. Раз, два, три, все. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, раз, два, три, раз, два. Я не буду сейчас качать. Раз, два, три, раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, четыре. Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Раз, два, три. Один, два, три. Раз, два, три, четыре. Один, два, три. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, четыре. Все. Раз, один, два. Раз. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три. 1, 2. Раз, два, три. Раз, два, три.
Они включены, да, микрофон? То есть ты их просто не выводишь, а потом, когда будет вопрос, ее включишь. Почему толкаешь сам на свет? Сам уже на 16. 16 там.
Раз, два, три. Вам это слышно? Шановні гості та учасники 8-го національного експертного форуму, ми розпочинаємо другу дискусійну панель через 5 хвилин. Просимо заходити до зали. Шановні учасники та гості 8-го національного експертного форуму, ми розпочинаємо роботу другої дискусійної панелі через 5 хвилин. Просимо заходити до зали. Там это точно слышно?
Приходов производителя.
Там это точно слышно? Шановні учасники та гості 8-го національного експертного форуму, ми розпочинаємо другу дискусійну панель через 3 хвилини. Просимо заходити до зали. Шановні учасники та гості 8-го національного форуму, ми розпочинаємо роботу другої дискусійної панелі через 2 хвилини. Просимо заходити до залу.
Все шикарно.
Шановні учасники 8-го національного експертного форуму, ми розпочинаємо роботу другої дискусійної панелі. Просимо займати свої місця учасників дискусії та гостей форуму. Представники засобу інформації, відпустіть, будь ласка, учасника панельної дискусії. Нам треба розпочинати нашу панель. Ми розпочинаємо роботу другої дискусійної панелі. Сходите, пожалуйста.
Шановні колеги, будемо розпочинати другу нашу дискусійну панель.
We shall start the second discussion panel, and we hope it will be as interesting as the first one. And we shall have rather interesting keynote speakers.
Маємо надію, що з таким же запалом,
I believe with the same interest we shall discuss Ukrainian economics. What kind of driving forces and points of growth will take our economy into growth. I would like to introduce the speakers. Mr. Kubiev unfortunately could not attend this panel, and just right now we were informed by his office. I would like to introduce the Minister of Infrastructure, Mr. Omilyan, Executive Director of the National Committee for Industrial Development, member of Parliament of Ukraine, Mr. Director General of Investment Company Concord Capital, Mr. Mazepa. As I said before, we shall discuss factors of economic growth of Ukraine in a wide sense, and also we shall discuss particular sectors. Every speaker will introduce their vision. Each of them have an opinion, all of them have an opinion. What are the drivers of growth, of economics? I would like to invite Anatoly to be the first to have the floor. In the beginning of my presentation, I would like to discuss the situation in the country in order to formulate the answer to the question of today's panel. Ukraine occupies the second line in the rating of countries of economic development, having $3,500 GDP, $3,500 of GDP per capita. For the last 3 years, we have experienced unprecedented decline since 1990s of 3.5 times. And today we have GDP slightly exceeding $2,500. This is a critical mark. And consequences of that process is felt when millions of Ukrainians leave the country as they didn't find any job. Those are engineers, highly qualified workers, scientists. It's hard to assess that intellectual potential nowadays lost by the country. When we speak of support of Western countries, we discounted billions. I believe Ukraine invests several times more into the Western economies, as it is losing its qualified workforce of such a level, which is capable of implementing economic reform. I would like to say a few words about misconceptions that we can see today. Some people say agricultural sector in its today's shape, as it has 75-65% of import component, or IT, which is working on outsourcing, or assembly plants with low localization level, can take the economy out of crisis. I don't believe it is possible. Today's condition is 2-3% growth, is some kind of level which shows there is stabilization, and we pushed ourselves from the bottom. Yet there are fluctuations, the global conjuncture due to our material-based economy, and again we can demonstrate a negative trend. As an objective, we need to pass 5-7% growth barrier, so that in 5 to 7 years we can lay down the basis and the concept of understandable economic growth, in order to say that we indeed have started restorative growth of economy and will move ourselves closer to parameters of European countries. Every country was working differently on those objectives. What is the specificity of Ukraine? We have high intellectual potential at the level of top European countries, and yet we have the lowest GDP per capita. We can say it's next to the poverty threshold. We must cite it following the traditional way when we spoke of subsectoral programs. By the way, in 25 years of the history of Ukraine, I believe that never there was an industrial policy in place. Normally the governments have joined successors of failures, which took place in the industry due to political conjuncture. A serious industrial policy for the last years of independence did not take place. There were some programs that have remained on shelves. Scientists determined what innovation processes are needed, so innovations had to be determined by real business. And this is where we are now. I believe we need a product-based approach. We need new line of innovative products capable of becoming drivers of the economy. And characteristics of that product is high value added, availability of export potential, which will mean competitiveness, productivity of labor that will help to overcome the threshold of 500 euro. It means that people will stop leaving the country. And we shall preserve the most important things, which is human potential we need for the economic transformations. Not a single country passed that road with no support of the government. We need to create a vertical to be involved in industrial policy at the level of central government, a team of professional managers who can support such projects. The project must be on a consensus basis or a cluster, uniting our competences that we still have in the country, sectoral science, industry, and of course participation of the government. That symbiosis will help us to achieve the height that we need of 5 to 7% of economic growth. Globally, there are numerous examples when countries have started and have successfully overcome that economic gap. The economic growth should be based not only on the market approach and also by public to private partnership. That will be a basis of economic growth. We shall be able to become one of the wealthy countries and overcome the negative processes that are happening nowadays in the economy. And finally, I would like to say that a response to today's situation in the east of Ukraine, the postponed costs that the country await the country due to reintegration of Donbass and so on, can only be an economic success. Nothing else can be facing us, and economic success must be counted by the percentage-wise, more than 5 to 7% per year of economic growth, of GDP growth. As we have heard from Mr. Walker, by security, basis of security is reform and transformation in the country. Thank you, Anatoly. There are myths that Ukraine must become agricultural super country, or should it become a transit super country? Yes, I would like to give the floor to the Minister for Infrastructure of the country. Mr. Omelian, he will discuss what is the view of line minister. What are the drivers which will take Ukraine's economy to growth? I will just be looking into some papers. I just returned from London, and I cannot really focus on the reality. The overall topic of the forum is that Ukraine is the aspiration for equilibrium. I think it's a good statement which characterizes a situation. The aspiration for equilibrium, this is a principle. This is the condition of calmness under the influence of mutually counterbalancing forces. This is an equilibrium. We are aspiring for equilibrium. We are fighting against corruption, and we're taking corrupt people to prison. We are doing the reform, but the only reform people notice is repair of the motorways, having 50% of support. We speak of national interest, and this is broken against private interests. We're spending a lot of efforts just to stay in place, and the world is going forward. Yes, we are better compared to what we were in the year 2013, but the world in 2017 left Ukraine behind. Equilibrium is a luxury which can be afforded only by countries having sufficient base, top 9 or top 20, not more. The modern world is a world of new technology, cryptocurrencies, artificial intellect, free economy. The modern world is one of risks and experiments and breakthroughs. In this room, there are quite many people who are only successful because they have taken the risk, rather than observing equilibrium. The modern world was taken by post-industrial wave, the fourth industrial revolution. At the same time as we were kept shouting about our unique agricultural vector, we never thought of the speed of time. The war, which is referred to as Great Patriotic, lasted 1400 days. The so-called ADO, actually this is the war against Russian Federation, is now lasting 1300 days. Another 93 days, and ADO will be as long as the past Second World War. biggest of 20th century. What did we do of this time? Are we as strong as we are fighting with internal challenges as our fighters in the East to confront the external enemy? What shall we do? Shall we keep equilibrium, or shall we break it in order to give the vector of development? Yes, we repair the roads. We initiate reform in the economics, healthcare, and education. Is this sufficient, or are those just presentations to please all of us? We follow the basic predicted why and we commit small steps. Any aspiration to go beyond the policy and procedure is punished. I can tell that frankly as member of government. Yes, as a government we do our work, but this is not enough. People wait for something else, as well as time, as well as wealth. Where is the place of Ukraine in the map of the world in 2020? What kind of Ukraine shall we build? Everybody is waiting for the Ministry of Infrastructure, the transportation strategy till 2030. I would like to ask you, where is the strategy of development of Ukraine? Ukraine nowadays is looking for equilibrium inside the country and worldwide. Instead, we need to look for breakthrough decisions. We need to take a risk. Not to take a risk with people, but to take a risk in order to achieve new quality for the country. In the open environment, where the modern world is about, any closed system is doomed to stagnation and decline. My first wish as Minister of Infrastructure when I came to my office from the first day was to open Ukraine for the world. Before my eyes, there was Poland, which fully opened its economy. In Ukraine at that time, proudly they were looking at Poles, saying you have no chance. This will be the nation of intermediary merchandisers. You will ruin the industry, and we have giants, shipbuilding, aircraft building, or power sector. Where is all that now? And Poland is far ahead of us. Opening the market for international companies, creating competition, placing industries in the territory of Ukraine is our chance to move 5-10 years ahead. I would like to see in Ukraine as a Minister for Infrastructure, the modern cargo fleet on Dnipro, modern carriages and locomotives on Ukrainian rails, leading airlines of the world who can cheaply take any Ukrainian to any point of the world and then return him back with new knowledge and experience back home. High quality motorways, safe transport. And every day I'm fighting for that. No small victory is possible without great fight. Every objective has a purpose. The higher is the purpose, the bigger is the objective. Strategy of industrial growth as basis for economic growth is right. It's well predicted. It's all good against all bad and for everything good. And therefore it is bad. It works for 26 years and never really works. We need to take the risk. We need to focus on the digital economy, digital infrastructure, production electric cars, creating new transport corridors. The most important thing, creating our own powerful intellectual product. What we are rich with is creativeness, as well as artificial intellect. This is our ticket into the future that we have now. However, at the same time, we need to fulfill our homework. When I was going to school, the population of the world was 4.5 billion people. Nowadays, it's 7.5 billion people. And we need to understand that we are global. We are not 35, 40, 45 million. We are already 7.5 million, 7.5 billion, and we need to work for those markets. There are all capabilities for that. Any of your products will reach any corner of the world within one day rather than months or years. What are the points of growth in my conviction? I will not be regional, as I say, this is agriculture. Yet a different agriculture from we have today. A small Netherlands is exporting agricultural products more than we expect to export totally from Ukraine. Totally different technology, totally different productivity of labor, and totally different results. Yes, this is efficient banking system because without it, there is no progress in the economy. And number 3 is intellect, creativeness, modern technology solutions. We are repairing motorways in order to have quality communications with every province as well as between Ukraine and EU. We insist and we shall introduce low-cost airlines for Ukrainians to have a choice and to have the economy developing. We are concentrating on many other leading sectors in the field of infrastructure. And we would like to change that equilibrium, which is has frozen infrastructure, where every square meter belongs to someone, and everybody, instead of having flags of global international companies, to have its own kiosk with sausages and having $2 per year or per month. The transport infrastructure will be one of the drivers that will change the country. For us, it's necessary to change shift the balance, to shift the agreements, to shift what people consume as massive products, pretending something is changing, something is improving. Nothing is improving. The same trend as we had 25 years ago with a different face. We need to unite around values and ideas. We need to forget of personalities. The power of the public official is the ability to produce changes. There are no eternal public officials or heroes. There are people, efficient people in their places and things they can do. I know my capability, I apply it, and I'm not afraid of any resistance. What about you? Thank you. We also invited Mr. Mazapa, who represents investment company, an investment company, an investment fund. As an investment banker, what is your viewpoint about the drivers of Ukrainian economy? What sectors are most promising in terms of growth? How does corporate capital make its money? To the less extent, I'm connected to any sectors. Or recently, I flew back from London, and on the plane, I read an interesting paper of analysts of Financial Times who did a study of how Poland, as a country which for 100 years was behind Western Europe in terms of living standards, infrastructure, motorways, to some extent culture, and that retarded Poland within just 20 years has caught up or even went ahead quite many countries of Western Europe. There was a long discussion about the language, if they are Slavic people or not Slavic people. The analysts make findings, however, that the only or main factor which took Poland as a leaders in Poland was privatization. Within 20 years, the country has completely changed, as many of Polish elites and the leaders and politicians could not change for the last 500 years. Has completely changed the country for the last 20 years. I believe privatization is something which also causes new managers to come, in addition to money, as well as corporate culture, as well as management culture, money of creditors, technology, innovation, and quite many other things that everything we are missing here, what we didn't see for quite a long. I distrust any public official, with all respect of those who stay here, yet I don't believe. If you were writing some theory book, of course I would undersign every word, but 25, 27 years, we've been doing the same things, running the same vicious circle, but nothing really happens. People say we fall down. The main thing, and I agree with the minister, Mr. Omelian, indeed we are living in the global world. In that world there is competition for the workforce and for money and for technology, as well as attention of young people, of which are fewer and fewer staying in the country. Privatization is one of the main ways of getting rid from excessive role of the government, excessive role of public officials, which is a situation, if they are not corrupt, they are less efficient compared to private businessmen. They are less motivated. They are actually, we also have friends. Can we really change?
Так вот желанием чиновников нельзя, потому что ты чем больше у тебя очередь прием.
the more you secure in the office, the more important you are.
Okay.
And then you can control more companies, and then you don't really want to change things, because this is vicious circle. Because the more you change, the less people you will have in your office waiting, and the less important you become, and then you will not be needed to anyone. Therefore, the culture did not really change in our society. For that reason, and I don't really believe. If there is privatization, it will be a mega breakthrough. If it does not happen, in 3 years we shall reconvene, and again we shall be doing the same. We have failed. Someone spoke Ukrainian, others Russian. We shall invent whole statement for the books, and nothing will happen. The same is true about the land reform. In Concord, we have counted that the effect for GDP will be 45% per year if they will change the basic ratios of economic relations in the rural areas. When the land can be a commodity, it will be subject matter of collateral, when people can freely dispose of land. If I have a car, I can sell it, but if I have the piece of land, I cannot do that, because some public officials who are far less efficient have invented this for me, but I don't want that story. Since the investors will look, they have a choice to invest in Russia or Portugal or Guinea, New Zealand, because the world is open, because the money goes around. In half an hour, it will be a totally other piece of the world. If you have quite many things, you also have to fight against. You say, why should I fight? If you, I will go to the place where people are happy to see us, and the investors are going to that place. Please look at the situation which is worldwide. The money costs nothing. In Western Europe, the fact that the money on your bank account, because you have to pay more to the banks, because the rate is negative, interest rate is negative. If you offer normal basic things that people are used to in Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, private ownership to land, the money will be channeled and the country will change. On the other hand, there are quite many successful examples where the government played the leading role, like Venezuela, you're right? China, for example. In some countries, in some areas, it's not possible to do with no government. Education, science, you provoke me to say unpopular things. I believe our Academy of Science, headed by scientists who are 80 years old, who wrote the last article 30 years ago. This is just some bullshit coming from the old Soviet times that nobody really needs. The 5 billion hryvnia which is spent for that poor science should be taken away. Instead, you should have stimulate industry or science important for industry that will be really applied one. Mr. Patton was the last one who invented welding of Ukrainian science. Nothing else happened ever since. Denying the role of the government in transformation, I would like to mention Poland. In Poland, they return 50% of capital investment made in the innovative projects or creating the new jobs. In Poland, the interest rate is 45% of annual interest for those who develop their industry. This was created by the government. With no role of the government, no Polish miracle would happen. Those conditions are in place. The conditions Ukrainian business is working are totally different, because today we have high taxes, one of the highest taxes for land. Today we pay huge amounts of money for VAT. Also we pay tax for investment. As we take the equipment and pay 20% of VAT, we pay a tax on investment. This is the only country in Europe which pays a tax on investment. Of course, the climate is not best. However, denying the role of the government in the transformation, we need cannot be denied because business cannot do it on its own. Anatoly is an old school. I respect him, but he's really old school. Old school guy, based on the knowledge. We try to formulate a new approach towards development of the country. But they say the free market will introduce law and order. In fact, that's freedom to fight against competitors who are not equal by force. The world is global. Remember how the economy developed. The government created conditions for national companies to develop. The magic word is localization, the public procurement. Please have a look. All countries, please open the directives. We need to harmonize Ukrainian legislation with EU, with how the world learned to defend their markets in a civilized way. The life cycle, support of innovative projects, the time frame of signing contracts with innovative companies, not by customs duties, not by the barriers, but on a principle and a basis, and we need to harmonize, and we need to learn how to defend our business. Regretfully, we just make small steps. When they speak of the free market competition, this is doomed to a failure. There will be a desert here. There will be a desert. International companies are not interested. A good example is GE. If you remember the previous leadership of Ukrainian Rails, that have included 2.5 million in the renovation program to purchase imported electric locomotives, and they have prescribed the counterparties in the very beginning, as you may remember. More than once, we have criticized the leaders of Ukrainian Rails for such an approach. At the same time, the Prime Minister was saying that the renovation program should be built on localization of modern complicated technology from the first sample up to 40%. GE was the first to come to Ukrainian market where it will localize locomotives by 40% based on Kremenchuk carriage factory. There will be quite many companies involved. The multiplier will be 1 to 5, 1 to 6. This is an example when international companies coming to the market at the conditions regulated by the government. Instead, they could just pay $2.5 billion and support the Western economy. I believe that approach can be often conservative, but still it works well for the benefit of Ukraine. When we speak of the market economy and the free market, we mean efficient markets, that the government guarantees free competition and same access to all resources, to all companies. And this will be the end of the role of the government, followed by business to survive, to increase its scope, to become efficient or to die. On privatization, I fully agree with you. This is what we discuss every day: selling, 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 forgetting. The government companies is a complete theft. Whatever people say, whatever strategies and schedules are drawn, whatever presentations are made, please remember that corruption is inside. And then they built another cottage villages and factory houses worldwide, but nothing in Ukraine. I believe that Ukraine must involve powerful international companies. We have no alternative. We have no cheap resources to have new technology to re-equip our industries. When we hear of Ukraine's unique industries, regretfully 95% that's fictitious. Those are empty shops with equipment that are from 1970s, 1960s. On privatization, we can remember Interpipe. If you remember, there is a nice company producing also wheels, now wheel sets for the railroads. They began with what? They were directly connected to the orders of Ukrainian rails. There is an order, they pay wages, taxes. If not, they die. Situation in recent years was totally different. Interpipe was exporting its products worldwide for more than 90%. They are totally dependent on Ukrainian rails. Actually, Ukrainian rail is about to cease its existence, but Interpipe is prosperous. They have good, stable financial situation. This is a future for Ukrainian companies. We have another example, which is Ukr-Rich Float, Ukrainian river fleet. It was privatized. What remains zero. In reality, also, the fixed assets are 100% depreciated. Maybe there will be some development or some prospects. Yet it is sad. Shipbuilding plants privatized what remained of them. I was told recently in Mykolaiv the history of ocean shipyard. One of the biggest Dutch investors arrived. Ukrainian officials have interfered. They said, "Well, you have tax arrears. Please rebuy those, and then we shall have a VAT returned." That company just left. That company was sold and resold, and yet it's obscure what will be its destiny. Privatization is possible when you involve international companies. We need to localize products. What we say with General Electric, that GE Ukraine cannot just be a producer for Ukrainian segment. GE Ukraine must be a producer for the world logistical chain of GE worldwide. Then we shall have stable orders. We should not be afraid of competition. Let's say Nokia, the company which was city forming, was prospering, it disappeared, but the Finns did not surrender, now they create new products. This is also world, it's dynamic, and we need to understand how it works. And now we have to agree, and we close, and we try to buy government resources cheaply, sell it at the high price we cannot sell. At the high price we cannot invest, and this is beginning of tragedy. I believe those are existential things of private business. The industry and the state, and we have the viewpoints. We have the experts. I would like to give the floor to Viktor Subotin from Turboatom. As a leader of the state-owned company, Turboatom, I would like to say a few words to defend the state-owned machine building plants. Yes, there are problems with management, there are some negative indicators in most cases, yet it doesn't mean it's common needs of every company. By the end of the first semester of this year, top 100 best taxpayers of the country are just two machine building plants of Ukraine. This is Motor Sich on 51st place, privately owned, as well as Turboatom, 61st place. Otherwise, those are sectoral companies, commodity companies and monopolists in particular sectors. An example of Turboatom as a company working in the real market sector of the economy can be counted as an example of possible successful management by the state of the real state-owned sector of the economy. Those are not personalities of Mr. Subotin or another director. There is a vertical which makes it possible to successfully manage companies in the market economy inside the country. And depending on exports, more than 50% of export products is supplied for the last 10 years. And it was supplied efficiently because we pay high taxes. For the last 5 years, Turboatom paid into the budget of the government more than 5 billion hryvnia, including dividends, in addition to taxes. Therefore, the thing mentioned by Anatoly is a key for development of economies. It's not preferences for some companies, it's public administration that will make it possible to develop domestic investment, including taxable investment, as Anatoly said before, and also duties, the prohibitive duties. Yes, we have signed a commitment with the EU, and we cannot have prohibitive duties to European suppliers. But we have a fully open market for Asian suppliers, whom we don't have such agreements with, but we have allowed them into the country, to the domestic market, and with price-wise, with worse quality, they take us out of Ukraine. And this is against the backdrop of creating ProZorro system, which is the right thing to do. But the mechanism of ProZorro system of public procurement makes it possible to do intervention in the domestic markets and to receive actually budget funding of Ukraine for the importers. Would like to say the key phrase, public administration. This is a prerequisite of development of successful state. And state-owned companies, those are not the crooks. Those are the people working sincerely with their civic position for the sake of their country. So, since 2006, Victor is working. Yet at that time, Victor was not leader of the state-owned company. He was one of the shareholders of the small Kiev-based regional bank. And Mr. Subbotin, after such a statement about the state and the role of the state and the influence of the state, was one of the first people who just came to the stock market in Frankfurt, Germany, and he raised capital back in Germany because it was not possible inside the country. And he made the bank transparent, as we have raised capital for his bank, $20 or $30 million. 40 million. Then we have raised more, several hundreds of millions from other creditors. Then EBRD became part of the equity, as well as German KFC. KWC, as a small regional bank, became attractive for the range of the major global investors. So, confirming every word quoted about Turbatum. In Concord, we have discussed Ukrainian shipbuilding, Ukrainian machine building. Turbatum was one of their possible competitors to Siemens and other global manufacturers. So, where is Pivdenny, where is the Yamash project, where hundreds and thousands of similar companies? And Turbatum was lucky because they have an inspired management like yourself. Therefore, we can say it's an exception rather than the rule. It's normal, efficient management, honest, the one which doesn't steal from a state-owned company. So I rather incline to confirming the words of the Minister of Infrastructure, where the official is not, public official is not the best manager. What will happen if all of a sudden there is a miracle and the government will propose all kinds of companies for privatization? I hope it will not be one or two, but dozens of companies that will research the industry, the competitive environment, Ukraine, and so on. The way it happened to Odessa port plant, on one hand a good example, on the other hand a bad example. But indeed, quite many potential participants arrived, and there was a question of price. Indeed, if there is clear privatization, the government sells at any market price that plant, then the remaining dozen of pretenders who have spent the time, have hired lawyers, auditors, have analyzed the market, got interested in the market, but they could not buy. They were not competitive price-wise. Then we'll try to buy something else. Some competitors will buy something else, build something new on the greenfield. By making a small step, you just pull the huge locomotive of all kinds of activities, and the consequences that finally will be favorable also for GDP and prosperity. I agree with Anatoly. Role of the state is especially important to give the incentives. As soon as you give the incentives, let the private investor come, the foreign investor. This is true. I fully agree that Turbatum is an exception. But I speak of government regulation, when the government must launch a project and step aside. And if there should be minimal participation, only as a guarantor, because the project pass the procedures are not corrupt, must be funded by the banks. And believe me, when we start talking of such projects, honest and transparent, there won't be few of them. not so many of them, I mean, because such projects require professional training. And for such projects, it's necessary to have serious knowledge. This year, we can have 300 million for support investment into the industry and innovations. To unite business that will be the customer, sectoral science, maybe design bureaus, and the government will give a signal that it gives a green light to such projects. Those can be electric cars, alternative energy. Those will be the products that will compete in the international markets, but they must originate from Ukraine. We are working on the products developed in 1970s. The economy will not fly. We have a very low technology situation. If we speak of GE, we shall tomorrow sell those locomotives into Europe after we separate domestic market, because GE also transferred documentation. And this is a modern level. We can start from that level. Immediately we close the gap of 30 to 40 years of knowledge invested into that new product. This is what the approach which was generated for us to jump over the economic gap we find ourselves in. I agree with Igor, of course, privatization, of course, private initiative, and of course, entrepreneurial spirit, but everything will be on the soil of support. On the initial stage, the role of the government regulation is indispensable. I fully understand your feeling. I'm also touched when they say that you are all the same in the government, you just still do nothing. We have a success of Turbatum. Yet we were unanimous. This is an exception. There is success of Ukrainian mail. New team is changing Ukrainian mail. Successful administration of seaports. There is a new team and they're changing philosophy. And indeed, they have absolutely transparent bidding procedures at high level with quite a lot of money. And all modern leaders, global leaders participate in such bidding. When I came to the Ministry for Infrastructure as Deputy Minister, on paper we had 250 state-owned companies really functioning less than 80. So generating profit rather than loss, less than 5. Actually, behind each 250 companies there are dozens of thousands of workplaces. The fixed assets, luxury, ships, everything disappeared. Just a piece of paper and one accountant for 5 companies. This is what I say. If you were a private owner or Turbato were a private company, you could do it more than while being a leader of state-owned companies. Correct me if I'm wrong. At the same time, state-owned NASA, US is ordering flights from Elon Musk into the space, and also he's launching trains under the ground, 500 kilometers per hour, 100% private initiative and private money. First deputy head of Kiev City State Administration. I would like to say that we don't have to dramatize the situation. If there is outflow of personnel, those are agents of influence. If today we have any support, if we were helped during the revolution, because our people have been there. Therefore, know that as soon as it becomes slightly better here, they will all return. I would not, but they never return. I would not dramatize situation with privatization, because indeed, I agree with you that most probably this is the best way out. If take the country of Singapore, everything is controlled by the state. There is no square meter that they would sell. They believe this is their policy. And yet they have a compromise approach. If there is land, we don't sell it, but for 99 years we can lease it. Please use it. I believe that Even using that leverage, they sell twice. If I buy a leasing right for 100 years, in 50 years I die, my kids sell, and I'm 50, which is not enough to have the project paid back. So they buy for another 5 years, they keep selling it, but this is not anyone's private property. They could have litigation, and they don't imagine how the power sector can be privatized. No electric cars. Nowadays, Singapore procured 1,000 buses, diesel buses. I nearly fell from the chair. They say it's inefficient. They distrust those batteries and so on. They don't want to depend on China. Therefore, I believe we need a well-balanced approach. Coming back to the industry and development of the industry, I would like to quote another small detail, which also affects development of the industry. The example is our general plan. In view of the existing plans and standards, if you develop a general plan, a master plan, this is not a concept plan like everywhere. This is quite a detailed plan. We are a democratic country. We need to have it approved with all citizens. Even if they are not specialists, they must approve it before we approve it by Kyiv City Council. Most of the residents and the members of elected officials representing them believe that in their regions there must be a square, a park, a recreation zone, some relaxation, and the industrial zone must be elsewhere, in some other neighborhood. Therefore, we cannot have the plan approved. I would like to draw your attention of state government, of the government, in order to adopt us to Western standards of preparation of master plans. About response on public administration, for a week I studied the experience of Singapore. I was shocked. Makes a base, they are based on the following. They don't want to build a system, regardless of who is in the government. The system will work. They speak of one thing: leadership. They start training personnel from kindergarten, by school, by university. The second example, they are returning out of 300 people. They choose 18 ministers. They recognize only one thing: they need to choose the leader. And the leaders create systems, create policies, and so on. They don't recognize anything else. Edward Simpson, member of the National Committee for Industrial Development. A small statement. It's not a secret to anyone that about 80 and sometimes 90% of GDP growth worldwide is provided by new products, new services. What is called innovations. This is something scientific transferred into practice. It is the economic benefit rather than remaining in pure science. Understanding all that, what do we have, even organizationally? National Committee of Industrial Development headed by Prime Minister. That's fine. Just they have established National Council of Innovative Scientific Development. This is called like that, also headed by Prime Minister. Not a single person from industry or even from general design bureaus that are known worldwide. That division between the problematic science and problematic industry is still in place. I don't really understand how that 80% of growth from 5%, a minimum 5% of growth of the economy, this is the minimum you quoted. I take 80%. Innovative component in the dynamics, it's 4% only with innovations. This with a very large number and no trend. Anatoly, you mentioned that with no role of the government, and this is true. Even most market-based states show an example that in the innovation process, the government should play the role. How do you plan to break that practice, that the so-called practical studies are yet funded and chosen by the science with no participation of industry. The top agency that was created recently was created with no economic and no industrial leader, was a private or state. A question to you, Mr. Mazepa. You clearly mentioned that privatization is the main driver of development of the economy. In the industry, privatization lasts for more than 20 years, and this is true. A large portion of industry was privatized. The science is 100% owned by the state. Nobody says, they say innovation, some other words. Nobody speak of privatization of intellectual property. Everything remains state-owned. There was state property fund, and it is still there as an instrument for preparation of privatization. How to do privatization, how to allow for the opportunity to buy those few. Not everything is bad. A couple of things. I'm quoting your statement. Something is still valid in the scientific field, and yet there is no access, yet there is no opportunity of civilized purchasing, and also venture fund. I don't know how they will work when everything is encapsulated. I understand your question. So, Anatoly, shall we start with you? I'm not going to break anything, because I'm not the executive branch of the government. My objective is to show a positive example of cooperation of business, of sectoral science and business, that will follow innovative way. Such examples are in the country, including Turboatom, a state-owned plant, and a number of other companies. I will be happy to give them the floor. The companies who have chosen the innovative way, but those are few examples. You must take the scale when you innovative line of products is high value added. And the government should be the regulator in order to open the access to cheap resources, then going away. Maybe capitalizing their share. Those will be capabilities to launch a new line of products, because Ukraine has no prospects in the world market. We shall give away our market, whatever other obstacles, because we don't produce competitive goods. Yeah. Actually, it's necessary to launch competitive goods. Where shall we earn value added? The economy is commodity-based. We shall never become rich, even if we get privatized. We need to open the way to innovation. The Western companies will arrive and will do the basic assembly of production. They are not interested to move value added into our territory. It means to move the big risks. They will only use our market, and we need our own line of products that will feed Ukraine. Therefore, I suggest the following way, as well as the government is regulator, started to begin such a process. The government will have to return its money. In that process, you can immediately answer the question. If someone from sectoral science participates in that process, it's known what he receives money for. If we're trying the students for some specialities, it must be up to the government projects. Otherwise, we just train specialists for the West, and they will not find any job here. This is also a problem of vocational schools. The government wanted to shift it to the local budget, then it kept it for itself, but the solution is different. It must be funded by the industry, and the customer must be the industry. Also, students, they have to be paid for by the industry. Today, it is funded by industry. As it does not happen, it means that there is underdevelopment. But GDP 30,000 per capita shows that very brightly. The industry is underdeveloped. Privatization of science and intellectual property. You are the well-known scientist and have worked for the science. Where do you work now? You work for the private design bureau. The private design bureau, one of the few ones which remain in the country, only because that Some people, for example, Anatoly as industrialist really needs that because he is innovative and creative person. Therefore, in Kharkiv, he brought together the best people, or maybe on Turbatom they have some best people. Everybody else have remained. But will you privatize those semi-ruined houses and all those patents, scientific achievements? This never came actually down to patent, even it did. Then it was protected. Maybe it's a government secret. The security service will tell you this is a state secret. However, it's already obsolete, and it was obsolete 25 years ago because people have another technology to fly to space, and there isn't actually. Yes, for police it would be a state secret. So that science is useless. I call mathematicians and other. Please go to design bureau, motor sich, Turbatom, other industries. Otherwise, you can continue some more comfortable place. There is no science, there is illusion, there is nothing to privatize. Yet the public officials will steal that 15 million. 15 million. If 100, they will steal 100. For the mic is transferred. And we are pressed for time. We still have some statements. I will request every speaker to make some final conclusions. We are simply touching upon the questions which are not on the scale of the panel. We cannot cover every issue. We shall keep communicating in the lobby or maybe in some other formats. I am now MP. Before that, I was director of machine building plant in Kramatorsk city, which is a capital city having heavy machine building of the CIS. Nowadays, most of the companies, machine building companies, keep working. There are billions of dollars were invested into heavy machine building. Nowadays, they compete against quite many, but my story is different. In 2005, the law was approved on alternative energy. In line with that law, it was copied from German one. They have established 11.3 euro cents for wind power. Localization was included. Several degrees of localization, 30 or 50. The time was given for companies to get prepared. Since 2009, in 2016, as MPs, we have changed that law. Whatever I fought to keep localization, as a fact, it was yet removed. What is happening nowadays? The following is happening. The Turks are building with technology of GE in Odessa Oblast. Vesta is building in Kherson Oblast. The windmills. Every country, every citizen pays 11.3 euro cent for electricity produced from the wind. And yet, localization was well forgotten. As nowadays, there is German experience, which from 1990 allowed Germany to become #1 in the world for the quantity of renewable energy, creating 2 million of jobs. Brazil, which followed the way of barriers on non-localized products like duties stimulating creating new jobs, high-tech sectors such as machine building, inside the country, and we, the country, have declared that they have built a wind park in Kherson. That's wonderful. Now we're involved in alternative energy, forgetting that nowadays we have cheated ourselves twice. So we have built once. It was DTEC or Kherson, so it was built by private investors. But those private investors are building and financing machine building of other countries. In 2005, in 2010, without experience available to myself, I have created a company first for production of wind power generators and development of wind power generators. Now we can develop the wind turbines. We have built 2 years ago the wind park in Kazakhstan, which is the best one in Kazakhstan. It was visited 3 times by the President Nazarbayev. We won, Ukrainian turbines have won against Vestas, against Chinese. global #1 company, Chinese #1 company with global wind. But today we cannot build because European vendors come with their own financing. They have their own funding, 2% of annual interest. Whatever the tariff, whatever high the tariff is, it does not enable. The government regulation is the government wants machine building, which is de facto. So Anatoly knows that today production of wind turbines, making some serious equipment, because there's dozens of serious producers making the same product, creating the opportunities on the level of legislation, not supporting, however, at the level of government. It's impossible to reach the final results of creating GDP in the high-tech sectors. I would like to add a few words. Ukraine has one of the best conditions in Europe for the wind power. We have Yuzhmash these days. We have Azovmash, which is not working. The Ramash project. The companies discussed by Maxim, based in Kramatorsk, Kharkiv-based companies, capable of doing things. Electrotechmash, which can make generator. Actually, we have the full set that we don't need to create technologically, and the will of the government. So that localization is a main requirement, like 40 to 50% to be produced inside the countries, and also global companies will have to compete in the field of production, creating jobs back here inside the country.
Спасибо. Виктор Гусько, Запорож, огнеупор, если не ошибаюсь.
And the factory for plant for refractory materials. That's a major plant of the country. It's one of the 5 largest in CIS. Today's it's part of the industry of Zaporizhzhia, which generates these days enough cash in the form of tax payments and social support of the region. I would like to say one thing. In the developed countries, there is serious support of domestic producers. What do we need to do? We just need to understand if there is any government program of supporting business in terms of concessional landing, especially if such landing is focused on further serious modernization or efficiency improvement. Because today there is an issue that we are surviving. There are serious problems of companies connected to the situation in the country and the economy, and yet we are surviving. Therefore, I believe that for us to survive, we need 2 things. We need to do modernization in order to be competitive. As it was mentioned several times, that our competitors from Europe, America, China have such support. And we need a serious program in order to keep today's personnel that travel to work to Europe, Poland, for work to make more euros. We need to retain them, have them retained. Because tomorrow we're gonna lose a sector and lose domestic producers. Reviewing the issues of equilibrium, development of economy would be worthless, useless, because we can lose today and we can never catch up within 5 years. This is my most regretfully, we have depleted our agenda. I request the keynote speakers to make the final statements, then we can keep communicating in the lobby. I would like to quote one example. Last week I went to Italy. I was invited by the owner of a number of machine building plants using his hospitality. We have visited 2 or 3 plants. Total number of workers 900 people. Volume of production 200 million euro. The sector is aerospace, heavy machine building, mining, as well as railroads. Only the component supply. When I asked him what was the workload on business, there were some components which could not be found on catalogs. And they have discussed with the government of the province how much will be returned for that investment project. They expect 50 to 60% to be returned of the capital investment to be returned. And on the government level, they say 5 to 10% of the amount of capital investment, because they fulfill the parameters of the investment project. We have added, increased the experts, as they are doing the components for Boeing and Airbus. So I thought of the following. We were taken away from industrial cooperation. Now we are in the force majeure situation, and we are reloading our industry, and we look for our place in the global market. I don't want to take, we don't want to take the place of commodity supplier. We need a new blood circulation system that will connect us to the global world you mentioned before. Where the cash will be streamed from and where we should work. The regulatory role of the government at this stage, I'm not speaking of the final formula, will be really important. Privatization, fighting against corruption, changing the legislation, and yet the main thing is development of the industry with high value added. It must be a strategic priority for the coming 5 to 10 years, unless we become self-sufficient and we provide for stable growth that will guarantee multiplication effect. I will say briefly, I have remembered the years 2015-2016 when I traveled worldwide with roadshows saying that they must invest into Ukraine because we have cheap workforce. At that time is now over. There is no cheap workforce. Mobile people have left and others don't want to work. And we are on the threshold that we need to raise wages to people if we are interested to retain them, and this will make final products more expensive. None of the government members or top officials have left the country while they have stayed in the office, therefore it's not that difficult. This is also a bad sign. Singapore was mentioned. I like that country. I read the reform. I talk to those companies. As you may know, I have asked Singapore public officials, what keeps them there? The salary was not that high compared to private sector. It looks high, but it's not high in reality. As they say, they have a commitment, they feel responsible before the country. We need to find such people and we need to incorporate them into the government. 50% of people can be changed over time and 50% will remain having a responsibility, feeling responsible before the government. With the system of leaders, I disagree. Actually, the system works in Singapore, which chooses leaders, not the sons of prime ministers or mayors. And really, it chooses the best from any environment, and they become next prime ministers, ministers, and mayors. It works for it's the system which is working, not the leadership. In the future, yet I don't believe in government programs. I'm a public official with experience since the year 2000. I didn't see a single government program that would be taken to the end, that would be received, promised funding at least 50%, and to give effects for the country in terms of value added. I believe in conditions. If you can create the right conditions, equal for everyone, then there will be a chance also for Ukrainian companies to operate with high quality. Yes, of course, when there are global investors, there is a risk of Icarus in Hungary, which was purchased and then closed. Yet, believe me, this is just one of 10. None of 10 will work. I will tell you a brief history told to me by my friend. He's referred to as oligarch. He has built a major plant back in the field. He had an initiative what to do in order to support the local workforce, in order to keep those people, retain those people on the plant. He said, well, I will build the school, just a basic school, secondary school. And he has invited people, the teachers, and they went to look what is the best experience. They went to Scandinavia, because Scandinavian system of education is the best. And it is famous because on the earliest level, earliest stage, they try to define. If you're a piano player, you can go to the music school, or you are the fitter, then you have to learn how to do the fitting of the artist. And they determined that from the early age, and they believe it's best to direct people from the earliest age instead of spending money for best universities, and those people will become lawyers and economists. The most popular, choose some popular professions. And by the age of 30, if you're a janitor, I would not like to offend anyone, you will just come back to the same profession. But at the age of 45 or 30, 45. So with that idea, he returned to his village, trying to sell that. If you're a piano player, you can support your training. If you're a taxi driver, we can teach you how to drive a car. In the village, there was just a nightmare. How? My daughter will not study in Kiev in the university. She will not become an economist or a lawyer. She will never get married unless she goes to Kiev and unless she studies in the university. So, he listened to all that and he refused from his intention. We all want changes. People say they want to change. Tymoshenko, the prime minister, the president, everybody wants change. But when it comes to the real life, when it's not about writing the slogans, to prioritize things, to change things, to do the landing. How my daughter will get married if we change things? So I'm living in the paradigm that there are 7.5 billion people. Elon Musk is flying to space on his private planes, and he's building trains under the ground, not a paradigm. How my daughter will get married unless if I have the things change. This is what I am calling you. I would like to thank the speakers for this interesting discussion, the distinguished experts. I propose that we continue discussion in the lobby. I would like to remind you that the forum have co-organized Friedrich Herbert Foundation for Shining Music supported by State Committee for Industrial Development.
Красива презентація, такие вопросы, которые не только
Я думаю, Максим неплохо добавил.
Нормальна робота. Зараз
Давай сюда станем, чтобы видно было. Внимание. Да, давайте. Не лезь. Внимание.
Часть, даже, по-моему, начала этого.